At Omdurman in 1898, the whole new European arsenal was tested. Gunboats, automatic weapons, repeater rifles and dum-dum bullets against a numerically superior and very determined enemy. One of the most cheerful depictors of war, Winston Churchill, later winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature, was the war correspondent of the Morning Post. He had described the battle in My Early Life, 1930, the first volume of his autobiography. Nothing like the Battle of Omdurman will ever be seen again, Churchill writes. It was the last link in the long chain of those spectacular conflicts whose vivid and majestic splendor has done so much to invest war with glamour. Thanks to steamboats and a newly laid railway line, even out in the desert, Europeans were well supplied with provisions of every kind. Churchill thought it a good moment to live and determinedly set about the mill. Of course we should win, of course we should mow them down. Unfortunately, the British often missed out on their splendid game. Their opponents learned all too quickly that it was pointless to fight against modern weapons. They gave up before the British had the pleasure of wiping them out. Lord Garnet Wolseley, commander of the British troops in the First Ashanti War in 1874-76, met resistance and really enjoyed himself. It is only through experience of the sensation that we learn how intense, even in anticipation, is the rapture-giving delight which the attack upon the enemy affords. All other sensations are but as the tinkling of a doorbell in comparison with the throbbing of Big Ben. The Second Ashanti War in 1896 provided no opportunity for experiences of that kind. 2 days' march away from the capital, Kumasi, Robert Baden-Powell, the commander of the advanced troop, later to found the Boy Scouts, received an envoy offering unconditional surrender. To his disappointment, Baden-Powell did not fire a single shot at the natives. To get hostilities going, the British planned extreme provocations. The King of Ashanti was arrested together with his whole family. The king and his mother were forced to crawl on all fours up to the British officers sitting on crates of biscuit tins, receiving their subjugation. What did the King of Benin feel as he was hunted like a wild animal in the forests whilst his capital was going up in flames? What did the King of Ashanti feel as he crawled up to kiss the boots of his British overlords? No one asked them. Only very rarely do we hear them speak. At the end of the 1880s, the British South Africa Company advanced from the south into Matabeleland in today's Zimbabwe. In 1894, the Matabele people were conquered. The company shared their grazing lands out to white agents and adventurers, reducing their herds of cattle from 200,000 heads to 14,000 and prohibited all arms. White death patrols ruled with martial law, labour was forcibly recruited, and anyone who protested was immediately shot. The rebellion comes in 1896. The company calls in British troops. Baden-Powell is with them, pleased to have a go, at last against an enemy without much capacity to inflict damage on trained soldiers. In the very first battle, he and his troops killed 200 natives at the cost of 1 dead European. Lord Grey's priest, Father Bihler, was convinced that the blacks had to be exterminated. He states that the only chance for the future of the race is to exterminate the whole people, both male and female, over the age of 14, Grey writes to his wife on January 23, 1897. He himself did not wish to accept such a pessimistic conclusion, but the idea of extermination was near to hand, produced again and again in the white man's press. African leaders were quite aware of the risk of their people being exterminated. Somabulano himself took up the threat of extermination in his speech at the peace negotiations. You came, you conquered, the strongest takes the land. We accept your rule. We lived under you, but not as dogs. If we are to be dogs, it is better to be dead. You can never make the Amandabele dogs. You may wipe them out, but the children of the stars can never be dogs. At Omdurman, the strongest African military resistance was crushed. The battle can be best followed in the book Churchill wrote immediately after the experience, The River War, 1899. The morning of September 2nd, 1898, the following occurred. The white flags were nearly over the crest. In another minute they would become visible to the batteries. Did they realize what would come to meet them? They were in a dense mass, 2,800 yards from the 32nd Field Battery and the gunboats. The ranges were known. It was a matter of machinery. The mind was fascinated by the impending horror. I could see it coming. In a few seconds, swift destruction would rush over these brave men. They topped the crest and drew out into full view of the whole army. Their white banners made them conspicuous above all. As they saw the camp of their enemies, they discharged their rifles with a great roar of musketry and quickened their pace. For a moment, the white flags advanced in regular order, and the whole division crossed the crest and were exposed. About 20 shells struck them in the first minute. Some burst high in the air, others exactly in their faces. Others again plunged into the sand, and exploding, dashed clouds of red dust, splinters, and bullets amid the ranks. The white flags toppled over in all directions, yet they rose again immediately, as other men pressed forward to die for the Mahdi's sacred cause, and in defense of the successor of the true prophet of the only God. It was a terrible sight, for as yet they had not hurt us at all, and it seemed an unfair advantage to strike thus cruelly when they could not reply. The outmoded character of this description is particularly evident in the last sentence. An old-fashioned concept of honour and fair play and admiration for such pointless bravery had still not been superseded by the modern understanding that technical superiority provides a natural right to annihilate the enemy even when he is defenceless. 800 yards away, a ragged line of men was coming on desperately in the face of the pitiless fire. Churchill goes on. White banners tossing and collapsing, white figures subsiding in dozens. The infantrymen fired steadily and solidly, without hurry or excitement, for the enemy were far away. Besides, the soldiers were interested in the work and took great pains, but presently the mere physical act became tedious. The rifles grew hot, so hot, they had to be exchanged for those of the reserve companies. The Maxim guns exhausted all the water in their jackets. The empty cartridge cases tinkling to the ground soon formed small but growing heaps round each man. And all the time out on the plain on the other side, the bullets were shearing through flesh, smashing and splintering bone, blood spouted from terrible wounds. Valiant men were struggling on through a hell of whistling metal, exploding shells and spurting dust, suffering, despairing, dying. Churchill's empathy with the opponent's situation was not concerned with an enemy in wild flight away from there. This concerned a still attacking enemy who, if not stopped, in a short while would have shown themselves to be superior. The Caliph had put 15,000 men into this frontal assault. Churchill finds the plan of attack wise and well thought out, except on one vital point. It was based on a fatal underestimation of the effectiveness of modern weapons. Meanwhile, the great dervish army, which had advanced at sunrise in hope and courage, fled in utter rout, pursued by the 21st Lancers, and leaving more than 9,000 warriors dead and even greater numbers of wounded behind them. Thus ended the Battle of Omdurman, the most signal triumph ever gained by the arms of science over barbarians. Within the space of 5 hours, the strongest and best armed savage army yet arrayed against a modern European power had been destroyed and dispersed, with hardly any difficulty, comparatively small risk, and insignificant loss to the victors. Great Britain remained the undisputed superpower, and the great poet of imperialism, Rudyard Kipling, wrote, "Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed, go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need." This book, Exterminate All the Brutes, is definitely one I recommend you to purchase, read, and contemplate over. In fact, if you prefer to watch as opposed to read, there is actually a 4-part mini-series by the filmmaker Raoul Peck, which I only just discovered this week. He used this book by Sven Linguist and also 2 other books as his inspiration for the film. One of them is called Silencing the Past. Although this book is small, it covers many heavy topics, not just Hitler and the ingrained European belief that imperialism is a necessity and that its justified byproduct is the destruction of the lower races, but also topics such as Darwin, evolution, depopulation, and law. I will leave you with one final quote from this book. International law becomes phrases if its standards are also applied to barbaric people. To punish a Negro tribe, villages must be burned, and without setting examples of that kind, nothing can be achieved. If the German Reich, in such cases, applied international law, it would not be humanity or justice, but shameful weakness. Anyone paying the slightest bit of attention to what is going on in the world can see this double standard when governments today implement their man-made laws. Whether we're talking about Gaza, Ukraine, the war on drugs in ethnic communities, mass incarceration and the prison system, the pardoning of the Honduran president Juan Orlando Hernandez versus the recent capture of Maduro, the holes, hypocrisy and lies are clear to see for those who look. The only one who has the right to legislation, the only true objective source, is the Creator. There will be continuous oppression until the people truly want justice, bypass the propaganda, and seek to be under the divine system regardless whether they are Muslim or not.